And we are at the Montage with Joe and Pat LaBarbera. Welcome back to Rochester, gentlemen.
Thank you, Derrick. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Derrick. It's good to be back again after a couple of years for me, basically.
So for folks who may not know the story, talk about how you guys grew up and where and what led you into jazz.
Well, we started with music lessons from our father. He taught us all how to play, but the jazz actually comes from Pat because, I mean, we were playing Count Basie and Duke Ellington and Glenn Miller arrangements in a small family band, but Pat's the one who brought home the modern jazz albums.
So how did that start, Pat?
Well, it started in my high school because my music teacher had a subscription to these. You would send away to record companies, and they would send you these jazz records. And he had a whole bunch of them in the band room, and he would just let us go down to the band room and play. And we'd sit and skip classes, and he would. So well, and they would let us sit in there and just listen to jazz all afternoon in the practice rooms. And then we had stage bands. At that time, they were called stage band, or dance band actually was what it was called. And he let us put together a small group on Christmas and spring concerts and play little, Jerry Mulligan and some Chet Baker and little charts that we put together ourselves, some originals. And it kind of started from that. So my high school music teacher, although my father was our main influence musically, it was my high school music teacher, Frank Mattina.
So where'd you guys grow up?
Mount Morris, New York, 36 miles south of here, in the beautiful Genesee Valley, right next door to Letcher State Park, the Grand Canyon of the East.
So in playing jazz, we're talking now early 60s, mid-60s, early 70s. So we're talking about Joe Romano, the Mangione Brothers, the Python. Talk about that experience coming up in that scene at that time as kids like yourselves.
Well, we were all members of the Python Club. At the time, you're too young, but you used to have a membership card. You had to pay. You paid a fee. I think it was 50 cents, or you became a member of the Python Club because it was a private club. And a friend of ours, Bob Ladelfa, who's, I don't know if he's coming tomorrow night, basically, he would drive us in because we weren't driving at that time, and he would bring us into the club to hear different bands, and we heard all kinds of great groups, all the organ trios that came through. It was a great time, some fabulous bands.
How about for you, Joe?
Well, yeah, Python for sure, but then there were other clubs like the State Street Lounge where we heard the Mangiones, and then there was another joint that was short-lived, but it was called
Club Impulse.
Called Impulse. We saw John Coltrane there in 1961. So there was a lot going on in this town because I have to say, Rochester, New York, for the size of the city, there's always been a strong interest in jazz.
Yeah, the Impulse Gap Mangione was a partner in that club too. Yeah.
Speaking to Pat and Joe LaBarbera on Jazz 90.1. So for tonight's show, who's going to be in the band?
Tonight we have, of course, our leader, my big brother Pat LaBarbera. We have Harold Danko on piano, who we've known each other since the Army, which goes back a ways, and Woody Herman's band, and Dan Vitello on the bass, and myself on drums.
Very cool. Can you give us a sense, because either playing with Woody Herman or Buddy Rich, and tomorrow you'll be doing the centennial celebration of Buddy's music. You're talking about Elvin Jones and Bill Evans. I can't even imagine getting a phone call from those guys saying, "Can you join the band?" Give me a sense of that.
Well, yeah, I got to say, I've been fortunate my whole life because I have worked with all the heroes that we listen to on record, and I mean all of them, except for maybe Miles and Coltrane. I did not get to play with them. But virtually everybody else we listen to, West Coast and East Coast, I've been fortunate enough to get to play with them. And yeah, the gig with Bill was truly a highlight, and it was a thrill to be asked. You know it was a thrill, man. And it was a thrill to be on the bandstand with him.
How about for you, Pat?
Same thing. I mean, again, working with Elvin Jones and Buddy Rich, we had many great. I worked with McCoy Tyner, and then other great drummers would come by and sit in. I got to play with Papa Joe Jones, Philly Joe Jones, Art Blakey, Gene Krupa. They would all come by to play, so I got a chance to play with all the great historical figures in jazz too. It was fantastic.
So for tomorrow night's show, the centennial celebration on Buddy Rich, give us an idea and a sense of his legacy.
Well, I think Buddy frightened every drummer in the world, especially technically. He was a fantastic technical drummer. He was a great small group drummer. I loved him on the brushes when he played brushes. But for big band, Buddy could play with any big band. He didn't read music, but he had a fantastic memory, and he memorized everything that he heard. He knew all the books. I've seen him sit in with Basie and all kinds of different bands, and he knew all of their books, all the charts. He had them all in his head.
And for you, Joe?
Yeah, the thing about Buddy that always impressed me, he always played with feeling. That's why Lester Young loved him. That's why Dizzy loved him. That's why Bird loved him. Everybody wanted to play with him because he played with heart and with feeling. Obviously, the greatest technically gifted drummer ever, but played with a lot of heart.
Tonight, 6 and 10 o'clock, the Montage. Tomorrow, 6 and 9 at Kilbourne Hall. Guys, thank you so very much for taking jazz further and, again, being true Rochester jazz legends.
Thank you very much, Derrick.
Thank you.